Hello and welcome to a special Focus on Africa debate. I'm Alex Jakana. Now, we're in the radio theatre here at BBC New Broadcasting House talking about the nature and the future of democracy on the African continent. Can Africa reinvent democracy? Should it reinvent democracy? Well, it certainly has the potential. Africa has been described as the world's youngest continent, with an average age of just 19. It is also young in terms of democracies. Many countries gained their independence in the 1960s, and it was only in the 1990s that many one-party states reverted to multi-party democracy. More recently, there's been a wave of new democratic movements. The Arab Spring, for example, which began in Tunisia. And Tunisia, you remember, has just completed its first successful and peaceful presidential elections. In this debate, we'll explore the impact of Africa's young population on its fledgling and more established democracies. We'll look at the challenges as well as the changes facing democracy in Africa, like the impact of the social media on the political process and democracy. We'll also assess the future of democracy for the African continent.
The question of democracy in Africa is distinct from the question of democratization in Africa. Democratization is a sequence meant to achieve the value democracy precisely. The value democracy itself, of course, lends itself to any number of understandings, commonly understood as essentially a norm to be achieved through the process that we described, a set of institutional arrangements, the so-called checks and balances, and of course a type of behavior, which is a dimension that is usually forgotten. The question of democracy in Africa is also different, or should be distinct from the question of a Western-inspired type of matrix of democracy that would have to be exported or that would have to be indeed incorporated in the nascent African systems in the making. Away from these two misunderstandings, which are in fact ahistorical, if one were to properly historicize the question of democracy in Africa, one goes towards understanding this as for sure a work in progress, but a work in progress that would bring in a different type of notions. Primarily a three-tiered evolution: a pre-colonial phase, a colonial phase, and a post-colonial phase. That understanding all around the experience of colonialism has its limitations, but it helps us trace the trajectory of a more recent problem. Democratization, in fact, is a very recent question in Africa, about 30, 40 years at maximum. Now, as we do this, as we go into this understanding, we realize that the third component, the type of behavior that democracy is, not that it brings, but that it is, has historically been present in the historical political scenes of all, shall we say. That pre-colonial phase has tended to be romanticized or neglected, and neither extremes are helpful. What matters is that these theaters have historically demonstrated a presence of democracy in terms of systems of cooperation, systems of mutual understanding within a societal body, a community of sorts. We tend to refer to tribal systems, but that is sometimes excessively presented as a vignette. But in fact, the setting of traditional elders systems, a pushback against authority in these systems has existed. To be sure, the systems have tended to be paternalistic, sexist, dispossessive, but not more than any other system, even when democracy was being introduced elsewhere. However, over time, and in the context of kingdoms, the kingdoms of the Congo, the kingdoms of the Benin, the Mali kingdom, the Songhai Empire, all of the Ethiopian Empire, all of these systems over a series of experiences that are related but different. And we should all, of course, remember that the discussion about Africa should always be separated into subregions: Western and Eastern and Central and Southern Africa and the Sahel. All of these experiences, at the end of the day, were characterized, as relates to the vector of democracy, by limits in terms of how far one could go in pushing back against authority, which tended to be essentially centralized, and the absence of institutional vectors in a pre-modern time. That history, more importantly, this pre-colonial phase, was ultimately suspended, shall we say, or impacted by two key phenomena. The first one was slavery, the second one colonialism. Slavery, an experience of about 5 centuries, the 1400 to the 1900, about 18 million people impacted, 12 million rather uprooted, 1 million dying in transit. Essentially an experience that has turned all of that nascent, burgeoning experience about developing local patterns into something that was stunned for a moment, hijacked as this mass for slave trades, at least waves of slave trades impacting most, if not all, of the continent. That experience, as it played out, as I said, for quite a lengthy period of time, in effect suspended the discussion, or the practice more so. The debate was less advanced in that sense on democracy.
In our introductory preview of African history, references were made to the common origin of the people the white world prefers to call Negro. That we are here studying a single race, not races, but a single people, not peoples, is a major theory and fact of Black history and one of our principal guidelines. We are therefore primarily concerned only with those things that were characteristically African, practically universal among them from one end of the continent to the other, and which thereby indicate an ancient common culture and a common center of Black civilization. On this we stand. In this light, the African Constitution is discussed as a body of fundamental theories, principles, and practices drawn from the customary laws that govern Black African societies from the earliest times. The first task was to divorce traditional African institutions from those influenced by later Asian and European incursions, to determine what is truly African in the origin and what is in fact either Asian or European, or a reflection of any kind of external influence. Another task was to determine whether an institution called African was in fact African in the same sense of being universal among Blacks, a continent-wide institution contradistinction to something particular to one or more tribes, nations, or African regions. This distinction is important here, for too often things are characterized as African, which apply only to certain societies. These represent the development of the whole complex of cultural variations about which Western writers disclaim in emphasizing the great ethnic differences among the people. This is not accidental or without design. Caucasian fears about the possibility of Blacks developing a sense of oneness and unity of action is deep and centuries old. Many subtle schemes are used to maintain divisiveness and with success. I'm going to read that again. This is not accidental or without design. Caucasian fears about the possibilities of Blacks developing a sense of oneness and unity of action is deep and centuries old. Many subtle schemes are used to maintain divisiveness and with success. A student of comparative history can see without difficulty the various people scattered all over the world often develop similar institutions without ever having had any contact whatsoever. This is equally true of most isolated groups. Similar circumstances may produce similar ideals and cultural patterns, all of which may confirm the Cartesian theory about the equal distribution of common sense among all mankind. By simply doing what comes naturally, one society may evolve a life system not unlike any other society 10,000 miles away across distant oceans. Therefore, neither external influence theory nor that of the common origin of a widely segmented people should be hastily affirmed. We hold this to be true even in the study of one race in the generally same environment of one continent. The evidence must still be conclusive. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and I'm continuing my reading of Chancellor Williams' book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. I am on chapter 6, is the African Constitution, Birth of Democracy. And before I go any further, make sure you hit that like button, please hit that like button. The more likes we get, the more views we get. Need these likes, we need these comments. Run these likes up, hit that like button, please. Help a brother out, hook me up, hold me down, support me, all those things. Hit that like button, please. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you comment. Make sure you can hit that super like button if you want to support me. Other links to support are in the description, because support of this channel supports the growth of what we have here and the growth of my Black History School, and allows me more resources to be able to pour into the children in Black History School. So everything that I'm learning here, translating to this Black History School, so we can make sure we grow and we learn and we be able to utilize this information and have tangible results from what we learn. So thank you for supporting On the Shoulders of Giants. And you see my website scrolling at the bottom of the screen, www.ontheshoulders1.com. Check me out. So we're talking about the African Constitution, the birth of democracy, right? So government in Africa, ideas in Africa about culture, lifestyles, governance, how African people go about their ways of life, pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial, as the gentleman stated in the video. So we're focusing on governmental structures, but we're also focusing on African democracy, the birth of democracy in the world, the birth of African democracy on the African continent, before democracy was tainted by outsiders, and after democracy was tainted by outsiders. But the importance of the governmental structures, the reason the governmental structures exist, but also how they exist in comparison to the Western governmental structures that we're mostly used to. We have been totally separated from truly original primary senses of African culture, ways of living, what they call primitive ways of living. We've been separated from these. And as you can see, or as you're going to hear as I read, as we move further, the idea of centralized governments, independent states, or states that work in conjunction with other states, in an African sense, in a primary or a primitive African sense, and I'm gonna use the word primitive as a synonym for primary or original, but in an original sense of how we go about self-governance, how we go about as a real communal group of people governing ourselves and making sure that we all are able to develop properly to have a strong society. And family is the core of that. Our ancient African ancestors had a focus on family, unlike what we have today. We focus on individualism, and they focused on family. The family structure was the most important structure in the society, because from the family structure, all other societal structures were built. If the family structure is trash, the society will be trash. So we got to think better and do better. But that's the whole reason why we read this information and go forward. And before I go forward, I just want to say thank you to my lady for getting me my country style sweater. It's one of my favorite YouTube channels. If you haven't checked it out, Country Style 2 with Art Fernell, check it out. Shout out to everybody in Bennettsville, South Carolina. And I love this country style. How do we do it? Country style. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. But anyway, let's get back into the reading. So picking it up on page 172 at the bottom of the page, the origin of African democracy. The foregoing observations suggest that the constitution of any people or nation, written or unwritten, derives from its customary rules of life, and that what we call now democracy was generally the earliest system among various peoples throughout the ancient world. What was relatively a new development was absolute monarchy. Among the blacks, democratic institutions evolved and functioned in a socioeconomic and political system, which Western writers call stateless societies or societies without chiefs. When these societies were referred to as primitive democracies, the writers are in fact doing the very opposite of what they intended, because far from being just a descriptive term for backward people, primitive also means the first, the beginners. Moreover, many of these stateless societies were states, in fact, without necessarily conforming to the predetermined Western structural pattern of the state. Indeed, what is called a stateless society in Africa will hardly be classified as such in the West, for the Western definition of a state does not include the requirements of one man as its executive head, a state being any collection of people occupying a given territory and living under their own government independently of external control. These facts are set forth at the outset because both the constitutional system and its offspring, African democracy, originated in chiefless societies. And what is even more significant, democracy reached its highest development here when the people actually governed themselves without chiefs, where self-government was a way of life and law and order were taken for granted. The basic structural outline of these states remained the same throughout Africa. There were usual variations and exceptions. The amazing thing was and is the uniformity. Amazing how the most basic elements of ancient Black civilization could have been held onto continent-wide by all of these dispersed and isolated groups in spite of the continuing impact of unimaginable forces of destruction. So we're talking about the fundamental structures of a society, the fundamental basics of African society. What makes an African society an African society? These fundamental principles are intact, were intact throughout the African societies, no matter where they went. Because remember, in the previous 2 or 3 videos, we talked about African people being dispersed throughout the Nile, throughout the continent, due to the invasions of the Asians, the Europeans, and even the Arabs, right? So these different groups of people coming in from the Mediterranean, from the East, and dispersing different groups of African people throughout the continent, but them able to rebuild and hold on to their cultural traits because the principles were never broken. The principles were there. The principles were given from a young age. And as we read further, you're going to see how the principles were given from a young age. So family is important because family helps to be that glue for that society, because family is the original teachers of the principles that go on to the larger society that keeps the society together. Family is important. The lineage, ties, and responsibilities in the age grade or age set systems were the earliest institutions through which the African Constitution functioned, and out of which its democracy was born. It was a network of kinsmen and alleged kinsmen, all of whom descended from the same ancestor or related ancestors. All might live in the same country or state, but they were often scattered far and near in separate and independent societies. The ancestor from whom they claimed descent was always great because of some outstanding deed or extraordinary achievements. These generally grew in magnitude as time and the generations passed, thus causing the true achievements of the overlaid by the false claims growing out of praise songs. Each generation of poets and storytellers gave the imagination full range in romantic glory. Myths were born in this manner, and the later concepts of both royalty and divinity gained support from the same source. In contentious, independent chiefdoms, the lineage was the powerful factor in providing the basis and incentives for the later formation of kingdoms and empires. No people in African history used the concept of kinship ties more effectively than the Lunda in the remarkable expansion of their empire. Even more remarkable than the territorial expansion of the Lunda Empire was the idea of a nation as one big brotherhood. Accordingly, instead of first attempting to conquer and annex by force, they would approach independent states and seek to demonstrate from oral history that all of them were merely segments of a common lineage. All brothers, in fact. It appears that the majority of states believed in the principle of a common ancestry and readily became members of the empire. Some required more facts before they were convinced. Still others were not convinced or preferred to remain separate and independent anyway. These were generally conquered and given a lower status in the nation than those who united voluntarily. But we are considering lineage before the rise of kingdoms, and in particular, the lineage as the governing and organizing forces in states or chiefs or kings. where commonly consensus was the supreme law that anyone could ignore only at its peril. So once again, these ways of living, these codes, these principles, these laws, these governing principles, right? These ways of governance, right? They existed throughout the various chiefdoms, throughout the various states, throughout the various empires, kingdoms, all these different things. But we're also talking about the expansion of kingdoms, the expansion of ideas, the expansion of customs and culture, but the maintaining of the principles, because all of these different people had the same principles. So as Chancellor Williams stated, so all chiefdoms, all independent states that became a part of kingdoms or empires were not taken by force, all of them. Some agreed to just become a part of it. Those who disagreed were taken by force. The expansion of empires, as I've stated over and over and over and over and over, the expansion of empires happened in Africa. That's how African empires became what they are. But Chancellor Williams is saying that they all didn't happen by force. Some complied and some said, hey, well, it makes sense. We are all the same. We're all of the same kinship. So let's become one. And others say, well, we might be of the same kinship, but we might not. But I ain't doing what y'all want me to do. We're going to do our own thing. Y'all do your own thing. But then they was taken in anyway and given a lower status. So we're not saying all African societies were perfect, but we are saying this is how African societies function without the Europeans. And this is how we became who we are and made us the envy of the world and made the Europeans want to come take what we had. The Europeans didn't want to come take things from people who had nothing, who developed nothing. They came and took from people who had high civilization developed. There were quarrels and warfare between these member states of the common lineage. The highly humane aspect of African warfare that puzzled many Western visitors doubtlessly developed from the widespread recognition of lineage or kinship ties. For in the much heralded tribal wars, the main objective was to overcome or frighten away the adversary, not to kill at all if it could be avoided. Hence the hideous mask and blood-curdling screams as they charged. Even when the enemy was defeated or completely surrounded, escape routes were provided. The victors pretended not to be aware of them. Indeed, there are reports of rest periods called when neither side seemed to be winning. At such times, the warriors on both sides might meet at the nearest stream to refresh themselves, kid each other, and laugh at each other's jokes until the drums, gongs, or trumpets sounded for the resumption of the battle. This was traditional Africa. How did it change the warfare to kill each other, lineage or no lineage? How did it happen that even now in our modern and advanced civilization, some of the most murderous and inhumane wars are fought by blacks against blacks? And this is the fact of their increasing awareness that they are in fact one people. It is quite clear that the earliest Africa war was not much more than a frightful game when among themselves. Was the radical change brought by the death-dealing incursions from Asia or Europe? These rises other questions of great urgency. Are we really civilized today? Have we not substituted the trappings of civilization, our triumphs in science, technology, and the computer revolution for civilization itself? Suffice it is to say here that the steady weakening of lineage ties and its spirit of unity was also a weakening of the sense of brotherhood and unity among the blacks. Today, it really finds little expression except in various language or tribal groups, and these maintain it more and more as a cohesive force to be used against all others. So, warfare was a bit different. Chancellor Williams is saying warfare was a bit different. He's saying that warfare was more about scaring your enemy away. And you're still seeking victory, but not victory through eliminating someone, but victory through scaring them away and them admitting defeat or just giving up rather than having to go out and eliminate your fellow kinsmen. But that all changed. Warfare in Africa changed. Ideas in Africa changed. Democracy in Africa changed. Lifestyles in Africa changed. African identity in African changed. The African mindsets in African changed because of the invaders, the incursions, right? Outsiders coming in, taking over, putting their influence in on the African people and the African culture, and birthing new ways of living, new ways of seeing each other, breaking down and spoiling and decaying the traditional African sense of unity, the traditional African sense of brotherhood and love amongst each other. Lineage then was the most powerful and effective force for unity and stability in early Africa. And this was so true that a state could be self-governed without the need for any one individual as ruler, chief, or king. Everyone was a lawyer because just about everyone knew the customary laws, unlike today. But we do have a whole bunch of laws. So the age grade or age set, also called class, was the specific organizational structure through which the society functioned. Now we're going to get more into how the society was characterized and set up, and how education and learning and customs were passed down, right? Classification was determined by the period in which one was born. All persons born in the same year or within a general but well-defined period before or after a given year belong to the same age grade. Each age grade covered a block of years. Age grade 1 might include all children up to age 12, grade 2 from 13 to 18, grade 3, 19 to 28, grade 4, 29 to 40, and grade 5, 40 and above. There was seniority within each grade according to age and intelligence. Intelligence and wisdom were supposed to match one's age, which is different from today. Stated another way, the African philosophy that accorded so much difference to elders was based upon the assumption that all other things being equal, those who were living in the world and experiencing life before others were born should know more than these others. This qualification is important because it was later applied in the election of chiefs and kings. Being an heir to the throne was not enough. One had to meet other qualifications or be passed over. Therefore, being older or the oldest in one's group did not command the usual respect if one was lazy, a troublemaker, or a fool. And that's a great way to do it. Now, well, Black America has no governmental structure, but under the governmental structure that we have in America, as you can see, fools can occupy all type of influential governmental and leadership positions. It's not based off of competency and ability and know-how. It's based off of influence, popularity, and being able to be talked into it. Custom. Black people have become accustomed to voting Democrat because we think that we're really pushing true democracy. But what we're reading is about true African democracy that we are far from and we are totally ignorant of. So let's get into early education. So the interlocking responsibilities of the various grades accounted for the smooth functioning of chiefless states. Each grade had its own societal, economic, and political role. The children's set covered the years of game and play. Around the ages of 6 and 7, however, general training and some little jobs began to be mingled with play. Primary education included storytelling, mental arithmetic, community songs and dances, learning the names of various birds and animals, the identification of poisonous snakes, local plants and trees, and how to run and climb swiftly when pursued by dangerous animals. Child training also included knowing and associating with members of one's age group as brothers and sisters, and to regard them as brothers and sisters until death and beyond. Little chores around the house became routine, such as gathering sticks of wood for fuel, bringing water, tending the cattle, feeding the chickens, or if a girl looking after baby or younger ones, imitating mother at cooking and trying to learn how to sew and knit. The nearest thing the boy's political role in childhood was when he carried his father's or uncle's stool to village council meetings and listened to the interminable debates. The next grade above childhood was teenage through age 18. These periods, of course, vary in different societies. Now, both training and responsibilities were stepped up. Playtime was either over or very much limited. Education and training became more complex and extensive. Upon their performance at this age level, the youth's entire future depended. He or she was marked for success or failure in the second age set that began at age 13. The boy was now required to learn his extended family history and that of his society, the geography of the region, names of neighboring states, and the nature of the relations with them, the handling of weapons, hunting as a skilled art, rapid calculation, clearing the bush for planting, the nature of soils and which kinds grew what best, military tactics, care and breeding of cattle, the division of labor between males and females, bartering tactics, rules for good manners at home and abroad, competitive sports leadership examples for the childhood age group below, and responsibilities of the age group above. The apprenticeship system, in which one became a skilled craftsman, was one of the most important of the second level age set activities. This is another reason why this age grade was the most crucial of all. At this end, one went through the initiation rites for the exalted level of manhood. The girls' age grade periods differed from these of the boys. Introduction to womanhood roles, for example, was earlier. They had the same intellectual training as the boys: history, geography, rapid calculation, poetry, music, and dance. The training in childcare, housekeeping, gardening, cooking, marketing, social relations, with particular stress on good manners. These were some of the essentials in the age grade education and training of young people at this level. Housekeeping mentioned above does not reveal the important kind of training that came under that heading. For its most important training aim was how to be a successful wife, an everlastingly desirable wife. In many societies, this training by older women away from the community included the art of exciting sexual intercourse, position variations, cleanliness in the relationship, and insert the do's and don'ts in intimate relations. These early Black societies were in many ways far in advance of the modern. The first two grades may be designed as A and B, the third as C, the fourth as D, and the final highest grade as grade E. Grade C, ages 19 through 28, was the manhood and first line of action group. Its members led in hunting, community construction, preparing the fields for planting, forming the various industrial craft guilds, protecting the far-ranging grazing cattle, upkeep of roads and paths between villages, policing areas when necessary, and forming the bulkwear of the fighting force. The young men in grade C were generally, the young women in grade C were generally wives. They were responsible for the planting and care of farms. The heavy work of bush clearing, etc., has been done by the men. The operations of the markets, hence the stress on the mental arithmetic in their training, visiting and care of the sick, and the age formation of women's societies, the media for women's social, economic, and indirect but very real political influence. And they were responsible for and in supreme control of all matters concerning the home. In these societies that had female fighting forces, the women's armies were formed almost entirely from grade C. In terms of constitutional rights, the duties, the two were inseparable in early Africa. There was no such difference between age group C and age group D. Seniority was the significant difference, since D was from age 29 to 40. If otherwise qualified, members of this class, upon reaching the age of 36, were eligible for election to the most highly honored body of the society, the Council of Elders, an honor and privileged society reserved for those 40 years old and above, group E. So that's a breakdown of the society from the youngest to the eldest. The age groups, what went into the age groups, what they learned, the responsibilities, how the responsibilities and the lessons from one age group carried on to the next, and how they set their children up to be competent, responsible adults to keep the society going. A healthy, functioning, successful society. They're learning it from children to teenage to adulthood and to eldership. The learning and the system wasn't stopped. But the structure start with the family, and then the society is built from that. So the earliest judicial systems. In chiefless states, the function of the elders was wholly advisory. For this reason, they rarely ever met as a council. The council meeting might be called by the senior elder in case of extreme emergency. Matters involving members of the same family or clan could be settled by the family council, each family or clan having its own elder. Conflicts between families or clans could be brought before any mutually acceptable elder for settlement. The elder's judgment was not binding on the parties to the dispute. This was the constitutional theory. If the case was big and serious and the disputants were dissatisfied with the elders' decision regarding it, they could call in one or more additional elders to hear and pass on the case. That decision was also advisory and could be disregarded by the parties to the action. Yes, the elders' advisory judgment could be ignored under the ancient African constitutional law. Yet, under practical operation of the same constitution, the disputants could ignore the elders' judgment only at their peril. For to ignore the elders was considered to be ignoring the community itself. The only exception to this was in cases where the elder or elders rendered an obviously bad decision. Even then, it was not left to the contestants to say whether the judgment was good or bad. The community decided because the community was thought to be represented in the ever-present crowd at such hearings. They, the people present, always indicated their attitude by expressions and nods of approval or disapproval of decisions reached. The constitutional theory and principle here are especially significant because of the important form they took in all African societies in every part of the continent as they evolved from societies without chiefs to centralized states under chiefs, kings, and emperors. For it is continent-wide constitutional development. The chief or king became the mouthpiece of the people and the instrument for carrying out their will. They still had no ruler in the Asian or European sense. One questions in dispute, he was in the same position as litigants in the chiefless states. Like them, under the Constitution, he had absolute power in theory, and in theory, he could ignore the council and do exactly as he pleased. But in practice, like the disputants, he did not dare to defy the council of elders, which also had evolved and became the people, their direct representatives. That means checks and balances are in place. Every member of the society is held by checks and balances. Nobody can be a rogue. Nobody can be a dictator. Nobody can run amok. Now, you can for fear of being disapproved by the society, by the community, because the king or the elders are the representatives of the people, the community, the society, not themselves. And that's the difference between the African principles and the European principles that we practice today. And the African principles represented the people in theory and in practice. The European system represents the people in theory. For the people, by the people, said the people, but for the individual, really. Africans generally prefer to dwell on the constitutional theories and not the constitutional practices. They proudly speak of the freedom and absolute powers of the chief or king. Some will even yell that the king owned all the land in the country. They are not trying to deceive. Words of another language often fail to translate the people's concepts and meanings. When they say the king is supreme or has absolute power, they mean that he has absolute power to carry out the will of the people. It was also so well understood that the supreme power rested in the people and that it was never thought necessary to state such a fact. Likewise, they would say and say proudly, the king owns all the land in the country, since everybody but a fool know that he didn't, that nobody owned the land, again in the Western sense, and that the king's role was that of a custodian or overseer, his principal duty being to see that the land was fairly distributed among all families. So once again, the representative of the people, not the ruler of the people, not the dictator of the people, not the one who constructs the way the people think, walk, talk, and feel. No, the people construct that. More of a communal sense of a democracy. Well, more of what our republic is actually supposed to be. Supposed to be. It was therefore in the societies without chiefs or kings where African democracy was born, where the concept that the people are sovereign was sovereign as natural as breathing. This is why in traditional Africa, the rights of the individual never came before the rights of the community. Let me read that again. And this is why in traditional Africa, the rights of the individual never came before the rights of the community. Individual freedom was unlimited until it clashed with the interest or welfare of the community. This is also why the evolution of a highly centralized state still found the king under common law, not above it and definitely unable to do as he pleased. If the self-governing people did not have a utopian society in any idealistic sense, theirs was a practical society in every way. The laws were natural laws, and order and justice prevailed because the society could not otherwise survive. Theirs was, in fact, a government of the people. Theirs was, in fact, not theory, a government by the people, and was, in fact, a government for the people. This was kind of this kind of government did not pass from the earth is another fact that we now call modern progress. So what Westerners and what we're practicing now is not new in the African sense if we go back and look at the way the Constitution and the government was set up. So now I'm going to read to you some political theories and principles of ancient African constitutional law and the fundamental rights of the African people. So there are about 26 of these principles. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read some of these principles. Once again, some political theories and principles of ancient African constitutional law and the fundamental rights of the African people, drawn from the African traditional constitution and customary laws. Different versions and modifications of the same laws occurs in different societies. So I'm going to read some, be skipping, but I'm going to read some. Number one is the people are the first and final source of all power. The rights of the community of people are and of right out to be superior to those of any individual, including chiefs and kings. The will of the people is the supreme law. Chiefs and kings are under the law, not above it. Chiefs, kings, and elders are not rulers. They are the elected representatives of the people and the instruments of executing their will. Government and people are one and the same. The family is recognized as the primary social, judicial, economic, and political unit of the society. The family council may function as a court empowered to try all internal, non-serious matters involving only members of the extended family group. The elders of each extended family group or clan is its chosen representative on the council. Decisions in council are made by the elders. The chiefs or kings must remain silent. Even when he announces the council's decisions, it is through a speaker, a linguist. Decrees or laws are issued in the same manner to assure that the voice of the chief or the kings is the voice of the people. This is an example of the provision that had wide variations. All money, gifts, taxes, and other forms of donations to chiefs or kings still belong to the people for relief or aid to individuals in times of need. Every member of the state has the right to appeal from a lower to a higher court. In some states, appeals could be taken even from the king's court to the mother of the nation. And the different subsections of this. So subsection A is the procedure. The procedure was from the chief's village court to the district court to the provincial court to the king's court. Such appeals were allowed in series of major crimes only, those affecting the whole society. Royalty in African term means royal worth, the highest in character, wisdom, sense of justice, and courage. He who founded the nation by uniting many as one must be a real leader, guide, and servant of his people. The people, in honor of the founder of the nation, thereafter will elect chiefs from his founder's family, the lineage, if the heirs meet the original test that reflect the founder's character whose spirit was supposed to be inherited. The trouble of one is the trouble of all. No one may go and want while others have anything to give. All are brothers and sisters. Each is his brothers and sisters' keepers. Age grades, sex, and classes are societal, economic, and political and military systems. For one, basic and advanced traditional education. Formal, 2, individual and group responsibility roles. 3, police and military training. 4, division of labor. 5, rites of passage and societal activities. In chiefless societies, the age grades are the organs of societal, economic, and political action. This says the community as a whole is conceived of as one party, opposition being conducted by leaders of various factions. Factions of opposition are usually formed by different age groups. Debates may go on indefinitely or until a consensus is reached. Once a consensus is reached, the community's will determined all open opposition to the common must cease. Those whose opposition is so serious that they are willing to accept the new law may splinter off either individually or in groups under a leader to form a new state or a nucleus for it. The African religion not being a creed or article of faith, but an actual way of thinking and living is reflected in all institutions and is therefore the greatest constitutional gift, greatest constitutional significance. The supreme command of the fighting forces is under the council, not the king. If the king becomes the commander in chief, it is through election by the council because of his qualifications as in general or field commander. This position ends with the war and the armed forces return to former status under the council, or more directly under the prospective paramount chiefs. There were no standing armies. So once again, like 26 rules or 26 laws or constitutional principles that these African societies would follow, and they're all, you know, formed around family structures and communal structures where the people have a voice. The people have representatives, but the representatives represent the people. But at the end of the day, the people have the voice, and all representatives represent the people, and all representatives are the voice of the people, and the people are the representatives, and the representatives are the people. There's no separation. So that's totally different from what we know. And so this last part is talking about the fundamental rights of the African people. The following is a representative number of human rights also drawn from the customary laws or traditional constitutions. There are 20 of these. I'm not going to read them all. I'm going to read a few. So the African people, each member of the community had the right to equal protection under the law, the right to a home, the right to land sufficient for earning livelihood for one another and family, the right to aid in times of trouble, the right to petition for redress of grievance, the right to criticize and condemn any acts by the authorities or propose new laws. Oppositional groups in some areas called the young men were recognized by law, the right to reject the community's final decision on any matter and to withdraw from the community unmolested, the right of rebellion and withdrawal, the right to a fair trial. There must be no punishment greater than the offense or fines beyond ability to pay. This latter is determined by income and status of individual and his family. The right to indemnify for injuries or loss caused by others. The right to family or community care in cases of sickness or accidents. The right to special aid from the chief in circumstances beyond the family's ability. The right to a general education covering morals and good manners, family rights and responsibilities, kinship groups and societal organization, neighborhoods and boundaries, farming and marketing, rapid mental calculation and family, clan, tribal, and state histories, the right to apprentice training for a useful vocation, the right to an inheritance as defined by custom, the right to protection and treatment as a guest in enemy territory once one is within the gates of the enemy's village, town, or city. And the last one is, and the right to an equal share of all benefits from common community undertakings if one has contributed to the fullest extent of his ability, no matter who or how many were able to contribute more. These constitutional principles and practices were held on to and carried by the migrating blacks to every part of the African continent. This fact is one of the most remarkable parts of the black man's story. Most remarkable because even those societies that sank to barbarism held on to the fundamentals age after age as though they were clutching the last threads of life itself. Even in Egypt, where the Asian and European impact was greatest, African constitutionalism could not be completely blotted out. So the way African societies were set up is explained. The way African thought, the way African ways of living, the way African governments are set up, the way African families are set up, all these ways of living, basically, Chancellor Williams just laid out for us how the government and the stateless systems and the chiefless systems or states are set up. So in the European sense or in the Asian sense, you need a ruler, you need a king, you need somebody to tell people how to live. In these instances, we have a code of conduct and we live by the code of conduct. Yes, we have governmental representative, but everything is contingent to the code. It's built off this code of conduct. Code of conduct. Our constitution of our way of living is our code of conduct. So once we get back to understanding the true value of family and really developing family and truly pouring into family and expanding family, and then building communities, neighborhoods, societies, we could build a nation for ourselves. We could better protect ourselves. You could better protect ourselves. Family, 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 family. Go. Every day you should be working on becoming the best version of yourself, the best Black person that you can be. We're not reading this stuff. We're not talking about this just to read and just to talk about it. I'm not just reading for my health, even though I love reading. I love reading this information, learning this information. I'm making sure that we have this information to build. What are you going to do today to make sure that you become a better person? What are you going to do every day to make sure you become a better person for yourself, for your family, for your society, for your neighborhood, for your people? African people, we need each other, but we need each other to be the best versions of ourselves. We need to grow up and we need to be good. That's how we better protect ourselves. So this is chapter 6, the African Constitution, Birth of Democracy, from page 171 to 171 to what? Egypt, man. 171 to 186. So chapter 6 is 171 to 186. So chapter 7, the scattering of the people, routes to death and reconstruction. So chapter 7 is from page 187 to, from 187 to, let's see, we got some length on it. From 187 to 207, 20 pages. 187 to 207, that's chapter 7. 187 to 207. So make sure y'all reading. If you haven't got your copy of The Destruction of Black Civilization, there's a link in my description where you can go through my Amazon affiliate program and get your copy of it. And not only will you be contributing to On the Shoulders of Giants, you have that, contributing to Chancellor Williams, but it's a whole win-win for all of us Black people. It's a whole win-win for us. So go on my description, click that link, get your copy of Destruction of Black Civilization, and I guarantee you, we're gonna continue to create win-win situations for each other. But all these are based off of our codes of conduct that we create for ourselves. And if you want to know about codes of conduct, go to thepax.org. Thepax.org. That link is in our description. We have created codes of conduct for us to live by. And once again, check out the Country Style YouTube channel. My man Art Fennell, him and his family, Black people who get together, cook, have fun, and just live. They have their ups and downs. They argue, they fuss, fight, love on each other, cook, and just everything. It's a great channel to watch. It's a great family because it's promoting family. So Country Style. I got my sweater. Thanks to my lady for getting my sweater. Thank you, baby, for getting my sweater. Because how do we do it? Country Style. So make sure you check out the Art Fennell and the Country Style 2. It's Country Style 2. That's Country Style 2. Because somebody hacked this old channel. Forget y'all people who hacked this old channel. Country Style 2 for the new channel. Check that out. And make sure y'all check out Office Hours with Professor Carl Tone Jones every Friday at 2 p.m. on FetLifeStation.com as well. All those links are in the description. I love you all. Make sure y'all catch the next video coming